Have you ever experienced a loss that changed your life forever? Hello, and welcome to the Butterfly Sage. Today is our first episode of Hard Talks, where we'll talk about hard subjects that not very many people do talk about. And today's first episode of Hard Talks, we're going to talk about grief. And during the holidays, sometimes holidays are not a happy experience. There are many people that are grieving this time of year and just can't celebrate the holidays in the same way that everyone else does. And so today, we're going to let you know why that is. Because grief takes on many forms. Oftentimes people think that grief is just experiencing the loss of a loved one. Grief is defined by the experience of coping with a loss, and that loss can mean anything. Sorry about the mews in the background. My cat is grieving. She's not getting enough attention at the moment. But actually, cats are an excellent way to help you cope with grief. Their purrs are literally low rumbles of healing frequencies. For the past 2 Christmases, I personally have been grieving. I lost my mom 2.5 years ago. And for the first Christmas, I was in shock and numbness. It kind of flew by, and I was able to celebrate. I think me and my brothers, we were all able to celebrate because it was just such a shock. It felt like she was just gone, like maybe on a trip somewhere. And so the realness of it all hadn't settled in yet. And then the second year comes along when your loved one is gone, and suddenly that realization, my cat is rubbing up on the camera, sorry. Suddenly that realization of them being gone forever hits. And that is when the depression sinks in. And it wasn't like I hadn't cried previously the year before. I did, but this whole realization of her never coming back to any Christmas or Thanksgiving was just so overwhelming. And there are many symptoms that comes from grief. Some I wouldn't have even expected. Some of the physical symptoms, not just like emotional, but some of the physical symptoms were surprising to me. You can get stomach aches. You can have major headaches. You can have random aches and pains. Grief can also cause a low immune system, which in turn makes you more sick with other things, viral, bacterial infections. You get colds more often. So grief can cause a lot of physical symptoms that people don't realize. On top of all of the emotional symptoms, such as anxiety, major panic attacks, depression, and insomnia, sleeplessness, lack of concentration. Oh my goodness, I can't believe how terrible my focus was during that time. We knew my mom was dying because she had pancreatic cancer, and during that time where she was still alive, but she was no longer really my mother, lack of concentration set in early before she passed. I actually got into 2 fender benders, and I have never personally been driving in a fender bender before, and I scraped up the side of 2 different cars during that 8-month window. And because my concentration was just gone, I actually thought I was losing peripheral vision because of it, because it always was on one side. But it turns out I lost my concentration. I could not focus for the life of me. And so that was one major symptom that I had, on top of the anxiety, helpless, depressive, anger thoughts that pop up. And people always say there's those 5 stages of grief. I'm not going to name them in order because I can never remember, but it's like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. They say there's 5 stages of grief, but really there's hundreds, because you repeat those stages of grief over and over again. I think the one I most deal with often is because I'm a fighter and I will fight to the death. It's why I'm still alive, to be honest. But anger was my worst symptom, constantly angry, and I struggle with anger about it. And just when you think you're done being angry over it, another season comes and you're angry again. And it can be the same for denying the fact that she's gone. It can be the same for being depressed about she's gone. You may think, oh, you're really sad and depressed and stuck in it, and then another season of life comes and you're able to move on and go forward, and you think, oh, thank goodness I've passed that depression part. But sometimes that depression part comes back again, and it comes back around again, and there are so many more stages and assets to grief than what they say. There are more than 5 stages. There's just so many. There's so many responses and so many symptoms that you can have physically and emotionally, that to limit it to those 5 stages of grief, I think it's kind of silly. For me, those stages of grief would come back around again, and I'm sure they will continue to do so. Maybe not quite, or at least hopefully not quite so hard and heavy as they were the last couple years. We are coming up on our 3rd Christmas, we just had our 3rd Thanksgiving without our mom. It's been 2.5 years that she's been gone, and things will never be the same. That's why I asked, is there a loss that has changed your life forever? Because it has changed our life forever. We will continue to meet together. Our family is really close. I have 3 brothers, and I love all of their spouses and my nieces and nephews, and we are close, and we will continue to get together at the holidays. But it's not the same, and the energy in the room when someone you love is gone, the energy in the room changes. For instance, this year in Thanksgiving, we enjoyed getting together, and I think we've been able to process and deal with her being gone a little bit, but yet there's that missing piece, and that energy was gone. And we always used to play games. One of the biggest games we would play was Trivial Pursuit, and the kids loved playing Ticket to Ride with Grandma, and nobody's playing any games right now. And that's not to say that we won't ever play them again, but for right now, in this season of time, that has changed, because it's just that energy from that person is gone. And I know someday we'll get back to the point where we do that, but that's what I mean when your life has changed forever. There's always a little bit of peace that's gone, but it doesn't mean you can't move on and move forward and continue. I picked grief as the hard subject to talk about for this month because a lot of people do struggle with grief over the holidays. Maybe their spouse died, maybe they lost a son or daughter. And grief isn't always about losing a loved one. It can be the loss of anything, literally anything. It could be the loss of a pet. It could be the loss of a living relationship, like maybe you broke ties with your parents or your son or daughter because of their addiction or their toxicity. Maybe you lost a job and you have a completely new career change and you're grieving over that loss. Maybe you've had to move from a house that you really loved or a neighborhood that you loved. There's many different types of loss. Maybe you just got divorced, and maybe you just found out your spouse was cheating on you and you're not divorced yet, and you're still in that very hard grief of dealing with that. And during these times, the holidays are not this happy, jolly, yay, let's celebrate Christmas, let's go meet with family, because it's not always the case. So that's why I chose grief. For people who have never had to experience such a heavy loss, I think oftentimes we don't understand how to react to those people who are grieving. And many times people simply will use phrases such as, oh, you'll be able to get over it with time, or At least your loved one, if you are a person of faith, someone will say to you, oh, at least your loved one is no longer in pain, or she's in a better place now. Or they'll quote scripture about grief and death to try and encourage you. And I know that all comes from a good heart and a good place. But honestly, when someone's grieving, that is not the right thing to say. Honestly, the best thing to say is nothing. Just simply say nothing. If you absolutely must have to say something because you can't be quiet, just say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And just listen. The best thing you can do to someone who is grieving from any type of a loss is to listen. Listen to their story and acknowledge what they are feeling inside, and that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be depressed. It's okay to be down, and just be there as a listener to support them. And for us people who are grieving, some of the things we can do are, one, ask for help. If you are in a place where you are so overwhelmed and your house is so disastrous, or you have little ones that you're trying to cope with a job and the little ones and keeping up with your house, and you're grieving because you lost someone or something, ask for help. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in asking for help. Go see a counselor. Hopefully your insurance plan will cover that. If not, go find a grief group, like a recovery group. I went to two different groups. One worked for me and one didn't. So don't give up. If you go to a group and it doesn't work for you, find a different type of group that will work for you. The one that worked for me, it was called the Grief Recovery Method, and that worked tremendously. Write a grief letter, something that you would want to say to that person or boss or coworker that made you leave your job, or whatever, to that loved one that you've lost, or to the pet that you lost. Write a grief letter. To the relationship that you lost, write down the letter and then toss it up and throw it away. Don't really give it to them. This is for you, as like a journal, a grief journal. Start a grief journal. Hug your pet if you don't have a pet. Turn on your best music. Do self-care, what you love to do. Bath, a spa, paint your nails, go get a massage. Do something for you during that time. Obviously, I like pets. And they've helped me tremendously in my lifetime. Those are just a few of the things that we who are grieving can do for ourselves. But don't be afraid to ask for help. And for those of you who are not grieving, make sure to add a little patience to your day for those who are. This does not mean you can't be happy around them. This does not mean that you can't celebrate the holidays and be joyful and jolly, because the holidays are joyful and jolly. And I love Christmas, and I love celebrating Christmas and giving things makes me happy. But not everybody who's grieving is going to respond that way. Just be kind. Have a little patience with people. We never know what they're dealing with behind closed doors when someone's yelling at a clerk at a retail store to move faster. We don't know what they're dealing with. Let's respond with kindness and love, because that's really what this world needs more of. If you need help with grief or the grieving process, I'm going to put a couple different links down in the description for you to be able to look up. Thanks for watching, and until next time, feed the pollinators for me.